to allow John Groom to feel comfortable speaking to him in that manner. Yes. John Groom is taking
Tensions between mainland China and Taiwan are putting the U.S. in a tough position and could become a major test for the President Joe Biden. Beijing is calling for a peaceful reunification with Taiwan, but in recent weeks it sent dozens of military aircraft into the island's air defense identification zone. Meanwhile, Taiwan remains defiant, with its president saying the island won't bow to pressure. And then on Monday, China's military released this video showing military drills in Fujian province directly across from Taiwan. The exact date when they took place is not known, but Will Ripley has the story. Will.
Taiwan's growing arsenal on full display at this weekend's National Day Parade. To defend against a growing threat from China, this small island is spending big on weapons, many made in the USA. F-16 fighters, Patriot missiles, $5 billion in U.S. weapons sold to Taiwan last year. Taiwan arms sales skyrocketed during the Trump years. The former president's hardline stance against China, one of the few Trump-era policies embraced by President Joe Biden. Defending Taiwan's democracy against authoritarian China has rare bipartisan support. Some worry Washington politics may be provoking Beijing, even pushing Taiwan and the U.S. into dangerous territory.
If you do take steps to look like you are aggressively defending Taiwan, then you arguably put them in a more vulnerable position. You arguably, again, irritate China.
Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen says the island is on the front lines of a much bigger battle.
Free and democratic countries have been alerted to the expansion of authoritarianism, and Taiwan is on the forefront of the defense line of fellow democracies.
China sent a record 150 warplanes near Taiwan in just 5 days this month. Biden's balancing act, calming cross-strait tensions, defending democracy, and preventing a conflict that could cost American lives.
I've spoken with Xi about Taiwan.
I think Taiwan really presents a challenge to any American presidential administration because you're trying to balance competing interests.
This is an extraordinary sight. 4 kinds of domestically produced missiles rolling through the capital in front of Taiwan's presidential palace, an ominous sign of escalating regional tensions.
We cannot control whether or not the Chinese Communist Party has the ability to attack Taiwan, but we are able to control and make sure it does not have the motivation to do so.
Every Chinese leader since Mao has vowed to take control of Taiwan. Analysts say President Xi Jinping may be the first with a military mighty enough to do it, even as he calls for peaceful reunification.
Whoever wins Taiwan wins the world.
China is locked in territorial disputes across the Indo-Pacific region. Taiwan, Beijing's biggest unresolved issue, and some say Biden's biggest test. Will Ripley, CNN, Taipei.
Joining me now from Taipei is Michael Cole, Senior Fellow with the Global Taiwan Institute in Washington. Great to have you. It's certainly been a week, even just the last few days, a ratcheting up of tensions. What's the mood there right now where you are?
Oh, very good to be here. The mood is the Taiwanese are not exactly not used to this kind of signaling and belligerence coming from Beijing. It has come in waves over the years. The Taiwanese people are very pragmatic, extraordinarily resilient, and I don't think that despite the threats that they have seen in the past 2 weeks or so, that they are quite convinced that Beijing is ready to go that one extra step and use force against Taiwan.
Yeah, because it's very clear China has the ability to militarily do what it wants. It's the question of whether it has the motivation. That's, where does Xi Jinping come on that?
Well, it's really hard to be in Xi Jinping. This is very hard to be in Xi Jinping's head, but certainly the Chinese have accumulated sufficient capabilities that now they have reached a point that if they decided to merge those capabilities with the intention of using force, they would be in a much better position than they were just 20 years ago, for example. My main fear is that the decision to launch hostilities against Taiwan would be mostly the result of pressures back in China. If the impression were being created, for example, that Taiwan has crossed too many red lines, or that the international context is clearly shifting in Taiwan's favor. This could eventually lead to what, from our end, would seem to be irrational behavior on the part of Beijing, in that, notwithstanding the likely costs of military adventurism, the regime would nevertheless initiate the hostilities, possibly drawing in the United States, countries like Japan, and other regional powers.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly the worst case scenario, and no doubt that is being digested in Washington as well. Will Ripley's piece there suggested that perhaps this increase in sales, $5 billion worth of weapons sold just last year to the Taiwanese, that is in a way perhaps provoking Beijing, baiting the bear as such.
Well, whatever Taiwan does that reinforces its sovereignty and interactions with the international community will always be seen as provocative by Beijing. And what we have seen over the decades is that China was very good at conditioning the international community into risk avoidance. So what we saw is long periods during which the United States would simply not sell weapons to Taiwan for fear that that would undermine their ability, their relationship with Beijing. Now under President Xi, the nationalism in China and the ideology are such that there's a awakening, certainly in places like Washington, D.C., but elsewhere, that no matter what we give to Beijing, it will never be enough for them. So now we're entering a new phase where, again, the United States taking the lead, but other countries are deciding to engage Taiwan to help defend a democracy, to help defend a frontline state in a growing war of ideologies, and seeing how Beijing will react. But more often than not, Beijing will express discontent, but at the same time realizes that simply taking on the international community, or even a coalition of democracies, could have catastrophic impact for Chinese economy, China's standing in the world. So it will back down. So this is a back and forth. This is a dance, and Taiwan is.
So how is Biden then gaming this out? He's hoping that Beijing will back down. Is that likely?
Well, this is a gamble. We're in unknown territory. Again, the assumption is that at the end of the road, Beijing would act rationally, will calculate the risks and benefits of taking drastic action in the Taiwan Strait. We obviously cannot predict the future, and that is why bolstering deterrence against the likelihood that China would decide to take that one extra step is absolutely essential. Taiwan has a role to play with procurement of different weapon systems, but also the more countries within the international community, not just militarily, but also politically and economically, promise a countervailing action against China if it attacked Taiwan, should contribute to deterrence and therefore reduce the likelihood that China would decide to attack Taiwan.
Thank you so much. Fascinating. Great to have your perspective there live from Taipei. J. Michael Cole.
Thank you.
Some people say our trade-in process feels too easy. They can't believe it's 100% online.